Where is it? Zinnia. It's over here. Zinnia. Zoro found it. Good girl. Oh, you found it. Go get it. Go get it. I had to weed whack down most of the crimson clover lawn, unfortunately. I weed whacked down most of the red clover too. That was expensive seed. Problem with the red clover is it doesn't bloom until it's like 3 feet tall. So you get this, massive weedy looking lawn that just looks like huge clover. Once it eventually does bloom, it's pretty. But I mean, this thing's almost as tall as I am. Look at all that nice crimson back there. If I could only grow one thing for the rest of my life, it'd probably be crimson clover. The corn looks phenomenal. Alright, well let's go into the backyard and look at some of this stuff up close. The squash blossoms look awesome. Wish I was seeing more pollinator activity back here. See plenty of bees on the crimson clover, just haven't seen a lot on the squash this year. Welcome back to Primitive Organic Garden. Some pretty looking chard there. It's been a little while since we did a garden tour. Watch my coffee, bud. Don't steal Dad's coffee. So yeah, we're gonna do a quick garden tour while it's cool out here. Mid-50s this morning, which is great. A couple days ago we hit 100 for the first time. Plants weren't particularly happy. Anyway, there's a couple new potted plants. I haven't figured out where I'm going to put them. This is a Casper eggplant. I want to say it's either a shishito or cubanelle. I got a lot of tomatoes this year that I don't know what they are because they came out of a mystery seed pack. The leeks are starting to flower now that they're 2 years old. There's some peppermint chard I really want to show y'all. These potatoes look great. Although somebody who used to be a carpenter recently told me that I shouldn't build raised beds out of wood like this. He said there's arsenic in the wood. But then again, he was like smoking cigarettes, so hard to say. This dill's flowering, looks pretty. I've gotten quite a few strawberries off this one. some monster chard over here. It's getting hard to water because I can't really reach the pot with the charred leaves like that. Had some more carrots dug up. If anybody knows what's doing this, please let me know. I had a rat trap and metal hardware cloth cage around the carrots, and something still managed to get in there and dig up all the carrots. The greenhouse is a huge mess now. It's shady most of the time. There's some big tomato that's kind of taken over the back, ryegrass and mint everywhere. Need to deal with that at some point soon. This squash seems to be doing alright. Couple more tomatoes, potato. Hey, bud. You like that crimson clover? This needs so much water. Water this thing almost every single day. It's the dwarf tamarillo. It's starting to make fruits though. Another pepper, a couple more tomatoes. So this is the squash patch this year, and I've gotten a couple squashes off of here so far. There is a lot of ryegrass, but you can see there's 12 big squash plants. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I don't know where the 12th one is. Oh, it's hiding under there. And this is another one. I haven't seen a whole lot of bees back here on the squash. Maybe they're having trouble finding it with all the rye and clover everywhere. I might need to take a weed whacker to this at some point around the squash. The onions are looking good. They started to bulb up pretty well. You can see some of them are flowering too. There's quite a bit of onion bulbs. I don't know if we can get over there at the moment. I have to. Oh, look at the tomatillos. These are all purple tomatillos, and they are doing great. This one in a bucket actually lost its main stem due to high winds. It snapped right in half. It was staked too on this bamboo stake, and it's still, hey baby, hey baby. Even with it being staked to the bamboo, it still lost its main stem. But now it actually looks like sturdier. It's got all these side branches coming off. I stuck most of the tomatillos in the ground. You can see the one in the bucket looks a little bit healthier. It's probably got more nitrogen in there. This raised bed here, I want to say this was squash last year. It's been garlic and onions all winter. It probably needs a little fertilizer. That's why the tomatillos are a little yellow, but they're not that heavy feeding of a plant. Random volunteer potato next to a late volunteer daikon. There's one of those Morris heading cabbage collard things in there. Some sunchokes that keep getting dug up. Radishes and mustard go into flower back here. Another potato. Tomato that survived frost but doesn't look good after the frost. The lettuce is all kind of going to seed now. There's some red oak leaf lettuce back there that's pretty cool behind that dill. This tomato looks good. The tomatoes in the fabric pots definitely look better than the ones in the plastic buckets. The ones in the ground are hit or miss. Some of the ones in the ground look really good, some don't. The tomatoes in the shade also look better than the ones in full sun, which is kind of interesting. I think when we get up to 90 plus degree temperatures like we're having most days, they really do benefit from shade. They don't use water as quickly, which means they're not losing nutrients as fast. I mean, this one just looks phenomenal. And then we can go look at the ones in the sun that don't look as great. I've also had a lot of bacterial canker this year, and I'm sure it came from the seed because the ones that are affected are in buckets with new buckets and new potting mix. I haven't had my coffee yet this morning, a little congested. The wild blackberries are starting to turn. Not sure how many I'll get off of this, but I'm pretty excited about that. I should have made that the centerpiece of the video. Another volunteer potato. Comfrey has just exploded. But there's a tomato in here that's trying to compete with the comfrey. This is probably a better view of the onions from the other side. It was hard to see anything because of the ryegrass. Random purple mustard, but you can see the onions starting to bulb up. Not all the onions are going to bulb. Some of these are long day onions, unfortunately. That blue kale in the middle looks gorgeous. My pole beans are doing good. So I've been working on crossing different varieties of pole beans, and oh, there's a cat. Pretty cat. Hey, cat. I want you to come hang out in my garden and hunt rats. But yeah, on the left is Seychelles pole bean. On the right is an old-timey cornfield pole bean. I crossed the two of those last year, and what's in the middle you can see is a little bit more vigorous. Had a really cool color too. This potato in the shade's doing good. Some oregano that was doing great until some of it got dug up for a couple carrots in there. Giant parsnip. I think that's in a pot, a fabric pot. Need to pull that probably soon before it gets woody. A lot of red clover. That's just going to be perennial, hopefully. So this is a bit of a mess back here, or at least it looks like a mess because of the ryegrass. But this is the best year of weed control I've ever gotten. Even though it looks weedy to the untrained eye, most of what looks weedy is annual ryegrass and perennial clover. And neither of those are a problem. The annual ryegrass is going to die pretty soon and leave a nice thick mulch to suppress other weeds throughout the summer. And the perennial clover I can always just, weed whack down when I want it to, and it's not something that really is going to spread. There's some chard in there by the squash. But yeah, the other side of the garden that's more visible from the road, I tend to keep cleaner looking. More leeks flowering. So we can go look at some of that. These are all volunteer potatoes that I didn't plant. Never grown potatoes here ever. I think squirrels must have dug potatoes from somewhere else a year or two ago and put them here. But they look good. I did plant the onions that are in here. Sunchoke patch that was repeatedly dug up by something, but it's coming back. Gotten quite a few strawberries off of these cultivated ones this year because it's been dry. In wet years, the roly-polies get them all. There's also a ton of wild strawberries. You can kind of see the contrast between the two here. You got the cultivated strawberry and the wild strawberry. The wild strawberries don't get eaten by roly-polies, which I find interesting. I don't think it's because the fruits are less palatable, but they tend to be smaller fruits and they stay more upright on the plant instead of drooping to the ground where roly-polies can get them. This tomato's doing pretty good. Starting to put fruits on. This one's been taking a lot of water. It's in a fabric pot in full sun. No sign of issues yet. This is a yellow brandywine. I don't think these are going to be very productive. I've only seen a couple fruits per plant. They are nice looking fruits. Another potato. This is a tomato that was also hit by frost, but it seems like it's coming back and now flowering. Still not a whole lot going on in the flower box out here by the road. Ooh, I hear a woodpecker. It's kind of cool. The clay pot towers are starting to get flower buds on them. Look at the corn. I'm pretty excited about that. Eggplant, 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 eggplant. Some arugula left over from winter. But yeah, I mean, that corn just looks great. It's about 5 feet tall now, starting to flower. It's not the variety I wanted to plant, but it's all I could get my hands on this year in terms of seed. It's called Butter and Sugar. It's a bicolor hybrid from somewhere in New England, I want to say. It survived frost, actually a freeze. I did cover it slightly, but there's a little bit more of it back here, but this is mostly it. I need to dig up these carrots before the rat or raccoon gets them. They're probably going to be fairly small carrots because they're packed so tightly close together. But I have noticed that in containers you can pack carrots really close together and they just make long, slender roots since they have a lot of soil depth to grow through. A couple cucumbers along the fence line here. And the first flower of the year. I mean, there's been winter flowers like crimson clover and stuff, but first summer flower has bloomed. That's a cool looking clay pot tower. This is interesting. This pepper plant completely died last year, got left out in a freeze, and now it's got some sprouts from the roots, which is shocking. I've never really seen that happen. A little bit of crimson I left. Couple onions hanging on, tomato. These are the tomatoes that I said had bacterial canker, and it must have come from the seed because these are brand new buckets, brand new bags of sterile potting soil, and 3 out of the 4 of these have bacterial canker on them. These were from a mixed seed pack that just said, like, I want to say it was like Fairy Morse rainbow mix or something like that. It had 4 or 5 different colors of tomato seed in it, but didn't tell you what varieties. You can see there's some fruits on all of these plants, but you can also see the bacterial canker on the leaves there. That's systemic, unfortunately. Once you have it, it's going to affect the entire plant. You can't just like prune it off. It also spreads from plant to plant from soil splash, so that's unfortunate. But these 4 might end up infecting this one, but they're far enough away from other plants that should be alright. Sunchokes are just exploding lately. But yeah, this tomato's in more shade and it seems to be doing better. It's got some fruits down there too. Loquat tree has put on a lot of size this year. It made fruits for the first time this year, which was really cool to see. And I think I'm gonna get lucky because all the fruits I ate off this year was about 2 dozen. They all only had 1 seed apiece, which is pretty rare. Usually loquats have like 3 and 4 and sometimes 5 seeds per fruit. What are you doing, silly? But yeah, should be harvesting the first tomatoes hopefully next week. These look like they're going to be mostly determinate varieties. The mixed seed pack ones. It's an eggplant I overwintered. I think this thing has some virus. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe that was the habanero. I'm not going to overwinter stuff like that anymore. But, alright, well this was kind of slow because I haven't had my coffee yet today, but at least y'all got to see some of the things that are going on in the backyard food forest. And I suppose we can take a quick look at some of the stuff on the side of the house and maybe the front. Like I said, I tend to keep things cleaner when they're in full view of the road, just so I don't get harassed as much. This year I haven't had a whole lot of harassment from the HOA in terms of you can't grow that there, but I have had some stuff stolen already this year. I have a lot of tomato transplants that I've been trying to sell because I have too many. So you'll see some that are just in pots on the porch. There's a couple tomatoes in here next to this chard. Some dill, collard. This yellow brandywine got really badly damaged by freezing temperatures. It's come back, then it got damaged by like 40-mile-an-hour winds, and this branch broke off and almost died, but now it's rooted itself, so it's coming back. I'll be interested to see how this plant does, because it's in a huge clay pot with good soil, but it just went through so much stress from late freezes to branches breaking off. I pruned most of the leaves off the other day because they were just growing kind of in a big mess. There was no airflow. It was just a ton of leaf material down here. So I pruned off most of the leaves, but it's actually a pretty big plant. Random avocado tree in here with the cilantro. This was cilantro and spinach all winter. Now it's, I guess, going to be squash this summer maybe. Had some volunteer potatoes pop up in this bucket that I didn't plant there. There's a little bit of squash over here. There were a lot of beets over here. I've eaten most of them, but you can see there's still a few. This tomato's doing pretty good. Full ornamental sweet potato. Some more onions that are making bulbs. This kale, collard, finally has made seed. That's exciting. The lawn's interesting right now because it's still ryegrass, but the rye is at the end because it's getting too hot. The crimson clover bloomed, but now it's getting too hot for that. So part of it's kind of like a golf course style lawn, which is nice and neat and clean, and then part of it's still flowering crimson clover, at least what's left of it. The raised bed in the front that's full of dollarweed is still largely full of dollarweed, but I've been working hard to smother it out with squash and sunflowers. This is now just a bunch of random vegetables. I mean, there's onions and garlic and leeks in here from winter that I haven't finished pulling. There's carrots that I'm still harvesting. There's gigantic squash plants in the middle. There's tomatillos and sunflowers all around the edge as a border. There's nasturtiums as a border. There's clover as a secondary border. And it's amazing how many vegetables are packed into this 6x6 area. So that'll be interesting to see. Oh, there's zinnias in here too. Zinnias, sunflowers, nasturtiums, carrots, leeks, onions, squash, tomatoes. Yeah, so that's, I don't want to say a mess. It actually looks kind of nice, but anyway. This leek's like 3 years old now. Still got some trays of stuff. Got some eggplant, tomatoes, peppers. The really cool tomato I'm excited about maybe for fall called Honeycomb Hybrid was ridiculously expensive. Makes small little peach colored fruits. A bunch of yellow brandywines still in here. Zinnias. And some expensive zinnias that are green and purple. Stuff on the porch has been a pretty fun salad garden. I mean, there's some succulents here too. But we got a lot of lettuce and arugula and spinach, which is cool to have that so late in the year. I guess it gets tons of shade on the porch and hasn't really been affected by the heat yet. The Meyer lemon over here is starting to put on fruits. I got like 25 fruits off that one plant last year. Yeah, that's all lettuce, arugula, spinach, lettuce, arugula, spinach. Tomatoes I'm trying to sell just because I have too many of them. I've given away a lot too. Yeah, so I think that about does it for today's garden tour. Thank y'all for tuning in. Are y'all playing? Are y'all playing? Are y'all being dogs? Be gentle. Be gentle, okay?